Hey, let me ask you something. Have you ever stopped and thought about race? Like, really thought about it? The concept of race isn't something that's foreign in America. However, when you try to piece together the reasoning behind it, it can get very weird very quickly. In order to make sense of this confusion, we need to establish what race isn't, what it actually is, and why it's important to know this in the first place. To start, let's get one important thing out of the way. Race is not biological. According to the book, Racial Formation in the United States, authors Omi and Winant explain the origin of this belief. According to the text, this flawed way of thinking stemmed from musings during the Enlightenment, where people sought to justify racial hierarchies through scientific rather than religious reasoning. This led to, for lack of better words, very interesting forms of pseudosciences. Now you may be thinking, okay, but racial groups all have similar appearances, like black people have dark skin and curly hair. However, this reasoning is still flawed. Even phenotypically speaking, race cannot be distinguished easily, as many physical traits exist in a gray area rather than being exclusive to a specific race. This can be seen in the court case Osawa versus the US, where a Japanese man known as Takao Osawa claimed that he was qualified as a white person and therefore was eligible for US citizenship. Part of the basis of his argument was that his skin color was pale enough to be considered white, which does follow the idea that race is based on skin tone, a phenotypical trait. Despite using the logic white people created, the judges dismissed these arguments and told him he was not white and therefore could not be granted US citizenship. So, if race isn't a biological concept, what exactly is it? The answer to this can be found in a chapter of the book Critical Race Theory, The Social Construction of Race by Ian Haney Lopez, who states that the notion that humankind can be divided along white, black, and yellow lines reveals the social rather than the scientific origins of race. Throughout the text, Haney Lopez talks about how race is something that is molded by society. One of the biggest pieces of evidence for this is that race isn't static, and that its emphasis and methods of classification change based on factors like time periods, societal perspectives, and context. An example of this can be seen in Haney Lopez's article, where the U.S. stereotypes on Mexicans changed based on U.S. culture. Initially, in the 1840s, Mexicans were considered lazy, but by 1863, they became more associated with industry and labor. This shows that the concept of racial groups and what defines them is very fluid and primarily hinges on what is popular within a society. So now that I've provided some clarity behind the main idea of race and debunked one of the common misconceptions about race, we now need to discuss the importance of understanding this concept. Some people may think, what's the big deal? Who cares if race is social rather than biological? Well, it's important to know this so that we can understand and deconstruct the ideologies we've grown up with. Inaccuracies about race were pushed in order to enforce and rationalize the societal divide between people. In the book, Impossible Subjects, author May Nye writes that eugenics became popularized in the 20th century because they believed that traits like morality and intelligence were determined by a person's race and genetics. Faulty logic like this led to many oppressive systems people live in today, such as redlining, police brutality, corruption in prison systems, and biases in educational and job opportunities. These are just some of the problems found in America alone, and there are many more at varying levels of nuance and scale. As a Black girl, I think it is very important for people to understand the society and culture they grow up in. Learning about the origins of race and debunking the myths surrounding it helps us to see things for what they really are and to help us work on unlearning the rhetoric that has been internalized in our country. So, I encourage you to start seeing things from multiple perspectives and to pick apart the things you hold to be true and see if those beliefs are things you actually value. Thank you for listening.